The 4.11 update is out now, and you can get some shiny new weapons and refines for Valter, Faye, Micaiah, and Elise. We are breaking some patterns today with our very first new unique weapon added for a healer along with a refine. We got Brave Veronica a refine, but she was part of CYL 2 and we previously never had a new unique staff get added. This should open the way for more unique staffs and refines for our older healers. Now in this video we'll be covering each new refine and we'll talk about some build ideas for every unit. You can grab any of these newly added weapons for SP at 5-star rarity, and then you need 200 Divine Dew to get the refined upgrades. First up we have Valter, who is a Grand Hero battle unit. Valter already had the Cursed Lance, but it's getting a slight adjustment to its original base effect. Now along with Accelerating Special Trigger, instead of adding a flat +2 attack and speed with 4 recoil damage after combat, Cursed Lance gets the full Fury 3 treatment, a flat +3 to all stats, and Valter takes 6 recoil damage after every fight. In essence, it is now a Sling plus Fury 3 Lance. This isn't too surprising, but because of the recoil damage, Valter will have a more riskier playstyle naturally. There are many ways to take advantage of Fury, but with the bonus slang effect, Valter will get to spam specials slightly faster, and that's always a great trait to have. Now for the special refine, if Valter has less than 100% HP at the start of combat, or if penalty is active on foe, grants attack, speed, defense +5 to unit during combat, and he inflicts special cooldown charge -1 on the foe per attack during combat. Alrighty, so Valter will always activate his refine once he takes damage, but he can also get the bonus stats and guard ability if he fights a foe affected by a debuff or a status effect. He does come with Panic Ploy to inflict debuffs himself, and the panic status will count toward activating Cursed Lance even if it's not turning any buffs negative. Panic itself is a negative status effect. Overall, the Cursed Lance is a pretty simple Fury based weapon. In total, Valter is getting an extra +8 attack, speed, and defense, and then +3 res. He has okay base attack and speed stats with a respectable defense stat, so you may or may not want to focus only on physical damage fights. If you focus on fighting enemies with penalties, then he gets guard even for that first encounter, and that's a really nice ability to have to avoid any kind of low cooldown special builds. I would say Valter probably is not going to want to build full tank, but he could do fine with something like Brazen Defense and Res to bunker down for multiple battles. For builds, obviously a Sling plus Fury Lance is gonna do just fine with a Desperation build. You can go for double Fury, but you can also opt for higher attack and speed increasing skills like Swift Sparrow 3 or even Life and Death. Brazen attack and speed as a Sacred Seal is just too good for this Desperation playstyle, and if Desperation is active, Valter will always get that +5 attack and speed from the refine. Since we have accelerated specials, Valter can also use Moonbow, and he will proc it on his second Desperation hit without needing Heavy Blade. If you do want to use Heavy Blade, then he could upgrade to Luna, which would now be a 2 cooldown special, or you could go with something like Bonfire. Gale Force is another idea since it's easier to use on a 4 cooldown. You can go for a risky Gale Force set with either double Fury or Life and Death and try to get Valter under 50% HP after his first fight. If he can get that low and proc Gale Force, he could fly out with Escape Route, or he could be a Wings of Mercy beacon for his allies, and he could move around, possibly making an attack first. Valter's kind of a crazy dude, so a high risk, high reward playstyle kind of fits his character. Last, I do want to talk about a more brawler-esque type of build. I think Cursed Lance could be interesting with Sturdy Impact to give Valter +18 defense on initiations. Even if he gets on lower HP levels, that could keep him alive, especially with something like the attack and defense solo Sacred Seal. You could also spread the stats out with the speed and res solo seal, and Valter does need some extra speed to compete nowadays. A setup like this could then become even more annoying with Guard Bearing for some enemy phase damage reduction, and you can use a healing special like Noontime or Soul or even Aether. Add on Attack Smoke or the new Rain C skills, and Valter can get a good amount of short-term survivability. While Panic Ploy is fine to keep, Valter would absolutely love Speed and Defense Rain or an Attack Rain variant. For the most part, Valter should not be tanking tons of enemies unless you use a healing special or a healer, but I do think he can find some alternative playstyles besides just attack and speed stacking. I'm happy with what he got, and I was thinking of building him up because I do have a lot of feathers piled up. Next we have Faye the Dragon, not the Owl or the Archer. Faye is going to get a new weapon, the Eternal Breath, and it's a 16-bite Dragonstone. At the start of the turn, if an ally is within 2 spaces of Faye, grants +5 to all stats to Faye, and allies within 2 spaces for 1 turn. She also has the usual range adaptive damage ability. So, Eternal Breath is a really solid buffing skill. It's like a Joint Hone everything, but with 2 range, and it kind of puts some of the other field buffing weapons to shame. Not only is +5 to all stats just fun and very easy to use, but Faye also gets these buffs, and there is no fancy conditions either. Stick with the team and spread the love. Now the refined ability, if bonus is active on Faye, inflict -4 attack and res on the foe and grant special cooldown charge +1 per foe's attack during combat. Now this is a solid refine. Obviously Faye should have field buffs on her from the base effect of the weapon, so she'll get an in-combat debuff effect and more special charging when attacked. Eternal Breath is super easy to utilize for an enemy phase playstyle, and Faye's gonna effectively get plus 9 defense and res when you combine her buffs with the debuffs. If you look at her stats, Faye has really high base HP, but then sort of spreads out the rest of her stats all over the place. She's not super slow, but her base defense is not amazing, so getting to boost those stats is nice. With her high base HP, she can avoid panic ploy type skills easier, and you can even use a defense super boon to get Faye a more even stat line. As an original launch unit, there are a ton of merged up Fays, and this weapon is a pretty nice tool for them. For builds, Eternal Breath may require some alterations to old setups, but the general ideas are still the same. Because Eternal Breath can provide extra special cooldown reduction, Faye can recreate the old Lightning Breath plus Steady Breath build. Obviously we're going to sub in extra distant counter this time, and Eternal Breath isn't giving us full Steady Breath type cooldown reduction, but we also aren't penalized by Lightning Breath's cooldown increase. Along with a full spread of stat buffs and some in-combat debuffs, Faye can definitely have some fun here. We recently got the new Dragon's Ire B skill, which is basically an improved quick riposte for dragons, since it also is part of no follow-up that negates enemy skills that prevent the user's follow-up attacks. Unless you go hard on speed increasing skills, Faye will do fine with a quick riposte type playstyle. You can then fill in your favorite C skill and secret skills like attack smoke or close and distant defense. Now if you're okay without DC, then a tier 3 dual stance is also great for enemy phase builds. Getting guard is super nice against faster enemies, and we can also use a low skill to stack with the in-combat debuffs from Eternal Breath. If you use low attack and res, then that gets Faye a permanent -7 attack and -7 res debuff, not to mention we're negating attack and res field buffs now. This could be great with a speed dual stance or a secret seal like steady posture, but regular quick repose is also fine. Last, here are some other skills to think about. Obviously with a field buffing weapon, Panic is Faye's nightmare, so maybe the Unity A skills could be interesting to counteract some of Panic's effects. If you aren't scared of Panic, then Bonus Doubler would basically set Faye up with +10 to all stats all the time. We didn't talk about it much, but Eternal Breath is a fine support weapon. +5 field buffs to nearby allies is insanely good, and it's also like running a full tactics buff setup. You can further these stat increases with drive type skills, and you can stack things like joint drive speed or distant guard. Eternal Breath is a super solid weapon. You got some nice bonus stats that Faye needs, cooldown reduction, and she can give all her allies a full spectrum field buff. Next up we have a refine for Micaiah's Thani. Thani is so good that they copied it 3 more times for the other Micaiahs, and it's gonna get a decent refine for being the OG. It still grants a flat +3 res, and it's effective against armored and cavalry units. It also now grants 30% damage reduction on the first attack against all ranged enemies. Previously this only applied to ranged armor and ranged cavalier foes. Micaiah is still going to specialize in nuking armor and cavalry units, but now she can take a little less damage from ranged infantry and flyers as well. Now, further refined at the start of combat, if Micaiah is more than 50% HP, grants +5 attack and res, and Micaiah makes a guaranteed follow-up attack. So this refine may look similar to last month's Divine Tearfang refine, but instead of depending on the enemy being healthy, it's tied to Micaiah being above half health. The guaranteed follow-up is super good for Micaiah since she's not a very fast mage, and obviously we're going to take that +5 attack and res any day. A good point I saw someone make is that this Thani refine doesn't really synergize with Micaiah's personal sacrifice assist skill. She could heal allies, but dropping under 50% HP is now not desirable. We can work around it, but it's still a bit strange. Overall, Thani got some nice additions, although Micaiah's main issue is surviving long enough to get off that second follow-up attack. She only has 18 defense and 35 base HP, which is not very high. For PvP modes, I feel like this encounter is just too prevalent, so without certain precautions, even if Micaiah can double more units, she may either die to the counterattack first, or she's just gonna drop under half health after one hit anyways. For builds, obviously Micaiah can still nuke lower res armor units and cavaliers. You simply stack as much attack as possible, and Thani gets an extra +5 attack, which will be nice to help taking out the super tanky targets. With the guaranteed follow-up attack that can help Micaiah either bypass one worry fighter type ability, or you can get her to double speedier tanks. Again, the only issue is surviving counterattacks, so instead of going for Death Blow 4, maybe use 30 impact for the extra +10 defense. Micaiah may drop under half health still, but that's better than flat out dying to one shot. Speaking of defense, Micaiah is still going to have good high res mage tanking potential, and she's even stronger now since she gets that 30% damage reduction versus infantry and flying mages. With the free follow-up attack, Micaiah no longer needs quick riposte for pure enemy phase sets, so you got more build freedom in that B slot. She basically gets more damage output on both phases thanks to that refine. Do be careful of fast attackers, and while she can reduce some damage from bows and daggers too, unless you get more defense, I don't know if you want to fight them completely. Now, speaking of beast skill options, here's some interesting possibilities. To stay healthy, Micaiah could run Mystic Boost or Renewal, and something like double Renewal skills could be a way to take advantage of Sacrifice while still being above 50% HP. Vantage is a great choice if you just need to counter Cavaliers or army units, and you could run it with close counter if you're really determined. Dual range could be nice to thwart blade tomes, and just general buff neutralization is great. You'll see Disrupt is needed if you want to blow up annoying cavalry healers. No follow-up might be useful, but although it really depends on how many follow-up abilities you need to deal with. Sabotage Res is good for debuffing, plus you can get extra damage from Micaiah. Last, since we've been talking about avoiding physical damage counterattacks, there is Wind Sweep. Not exactly easy to utilize with no extra speed bonuses, but it can help Micaiah block distant counter threats, and if you go super hard on a speed focused build, then she can improve the range of units she can attack into. Because of her guaranteed follow-up from Thani, Micaiah can double if she wins a speed battle, so it's not the worst idea ever, but the weaknesses are there in Micaiah's lowish base speed stat. Overall, I'd say Thani got a decent refine in general, but depending on how you use Micaiah, the builds can change a lot. Last new weapon is Elise's Staff. It's a 14-weight staff that grants +3 speed, and it also comes with Wrathful Staff, so Elise is going to deal damage like normal. It will also apply gravity to the target and foes within one space of the target. This should sound familiar because Elise's Staff is basically borrowing her sister's unique staff. Brave Camilla also has a gravity-based staff that grants extra attack and speed. Camilla is a very offensive healer, and while Elise doesn't have the highest base attack and speed spread, 32 attack and 32 speed is very respectable for a Gen 1 cavalry healer. Now, if you refine this weapon, if Elise or an ally initiates combat against a foe within 2 spaces of Elise, then she inflicts -4 to all stats on that foe during combat. So essentially, the refined portion gives Elise herself the in-combat debuff to use, and if she's within 2 spaces of an enemy that gets attacked by her teammates, then she will also apply the debuffs. In terms of selfish reasons, this is an incredibly good weapon, and refined for Elise if you want to turn into an offensive cavalry healer. She basically gains +7 speed and then +4 attack, defense, and res when initiating, with the built-in Wrathful Staff effect, and she can use Dazzling Staff to initiate safely and take out targets with some respective amounts of colorless magic damage. Having 3 movement and applying gravity is just the cherry on top, and with some ally repositioning skills, Elise can kite out smaller groups of enemies. I would say this is kind of the best you can ask for if you want an offensive healer, although Elise is unbelievably squishy, so she really cannot afford to take any physical damage hits. Dazzling Staff will almost always be a requirement for her. Like with Brave Veronica and healers in general, there's not a ton of crazy build variety if you want to use an offensive healer, since we really just need to focus on getting more attack and more speed. Elise will need Dazzling Staff, and then you want an appropriate attack and speed A skill like attack and speed push 4. That would give you +7 attack and speed, but be aware of the recoil damage since you need to be above 25% HP to get the stat boost. Healers can also use attack and speed solo, but I would recommend the push 4 most of the time. For C skills and sacred seals, you can run double Savage Blow to spread 14 out of combat damage, or Elise can opt for a more support skills like drives. Unlike Brave Veronica's Refine, if you want Elise to help out allies, she must position much more aggressively since she is the one inflicting the debuffs and she only has a 2-space range. It's very possible to also be within 2 spaces of an enemy, but your ally is off to the other side and you won't be able to share in-combat buffs with them. Last thing I want to bring up is that the new Rescue Plus assist skill from Flame can be used on full health allies. That means Elise can make an attack, apply her gravity status, then get danced, and she can draw back the dancer. The amount of kiting you can do is kinda disgusting. Not much else to say, our first new unique staff edition is quite powerful. Elise is a 5-star Oni healer, but honestly she holds up very well if you want a decent attack and speed cavalry healer. Obviously Brave Veronica is still really good and she got a refine too, so you may want to use her if you need even more stats for your team. I would probably not expect every new unique staff to be this good in terms of offensive use, but I guess we just have to see as they add more, hopefully soon. That's going to be it for this video. Will you be using any of these new weapons and refines? Please feel free to share any of your build ideas with everyone in the comments. I haven't done it yet, but I do kind of want a +10 Valter now. I need to see what kind of skill fodder I have lying around, but my feather stash and heroic girl stash keeps getting bigger, so I need to spend some very soon. Thanks for watching. I'll be back tomorrow to talk about our new ninja banner units.